How you doing today, John? It is just me and you. Brian is still missing. We got to do the milk carton, see if we can find him. No, all jokes aside, though, it's just me and you today, and you had a great idea for a topic. So why don't you just tell the great listeners what we were talking about today?
Well, we kind of came up, I won't say it was all my idea. I think you had a good hand in this, but when leadership and discipleship collide. So we talk a little bit about what it means to be a disciple. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And what that means for us as leaders and as followers. As usual, we went down some rabbit holes and kind of got to the topic in a roundabout way, but I think it was a fun and interesting discussion. And as usual, I definitely learned something talking to you about it. So I'm excited for our listeners to check it out and let us know what they think.
Yeah, I guess with that's a great place to just lead them in and let them go ahead and listen to the show.
Sounds good.
What's going on, John? How you doing today?
Not too bad. Had a little bit of a late night last night between some work stuff and a crying baby, but otherwise feeling good. I got my coffee and I'm ready to talk leadership.
I mean,
How are you?
At least for me, when you work in tech, those late nights always happen. I remember about 5 years ago, I got a call like 11:30 at night that a server had died. And so here I am in downtown DC, taking apart a server and all its pieces and putting a CPU in the middle of a server and just having it ready to go by 9 o'clock in the morning the next morning. So
no pressure, right?
I feel you on that. I've had those nights for sure. Luckily, I'm going to find a piece of wood here, knocking on this desk I got here. I haven't had one of those in a while, but they do tend to come.
My desk is made of glass, so I keep a piece of wood sitting here for just that purpose.
Oh, nice. So you're not superstitious at all, are you?
Just a little stitious, as Michael Scott would say.
Just a little stitches. Yeah, I love a little old Michael Scott.
Indeed.
Michael Scott, interesting enough, he's, and I digress here about what we're going to go off on the topic here, but I always use him as an example when I go for leadership about things that you shouldn't do, right? Because you can almost always grab a clip from that show. And you're like, oh, yeah, you definitely shouldn't do X as a leader. And then you can literally pull up a Michael Scott clip, right?
Yeah, and it's funny that throughout the show there are these like moments of clarity that he seems to have where it's like, hey, this guy actually is managing the team or actually does have a coherent thought. But anyway, I could talk about The Office all day. That you're right. It's a good example of a lot of times what not to do or how not to act. But I think that's most shows. It's like they take a normal scenario or a normal person and just amplify them to the nth degree. So we've probably all had like a Michael Scott-ish sort of leader, but not to the degree depicted in that show. So it's always a funny conversation. Working in government for so long, I've compared a lot of co-workers to people from the show Veep. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it's the same thing. Like
I started that one and I didn't.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. Nobody's that ridiculous, that one yet, but there you just see like tiny little. Well, hopefully nobody you're working with is quite as ridiculous as that show, but you see like the little character things that a good writer can just amplify and make into a hilarious show. So. Anyway, we digress.
So I worked in restaurants for a number of years, and I definitely worked with some characters.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say any names, but
yeah, I can imagine.
One of the crazy things I remember, I was a brand new lead line cook, which is like basically kind of like being a shift manager or something like that, right? And we used to make these cakes with brownies, and one of the ingredients that goes on it was Myers dark rum, right? You'd pour the dark rum and you'd measure out like a quarter of a cup or something. I don't even remember, man. But I turn around the corner of my eye and all I see is a bottle straight up like this of Myers dark rum, and a guy, who's supposed to be making the cake with his lips just all around it and is just swigging it straight down. And I'm
oh man, that's funny.
He's like, what, one cake, one for me? I was like, no.
But that's not how this works.
Yeah. So, but that's kind of what happens in that industry. It's, some stuff is definitely interesting, but I digress. So
there are characters everywhere we go. Huh?
For sure.
So that'll be a fun intro that we can probably just totally delete and not subject our listeners to. But no, I'm kidding.
Actually, we'll just use it as a soundbite clip.
Yeah.
We'll pull it out. But today it's just me and Jon again. Brian is off doing some running around, but we'll have him again on the next one. So Jon had an idea for a topic here. So what's your idea for topic? It's definitely not Michael Scott and the crazy things people do at work.
Although maybe that could tie back in. We'll see where the conversation goes. We had this idea of the difference between leadership and discipleship, and specifically the phrase, when leadership and discipleship collide. And I'm not sure that we'll, perfectly hit this topic. Because leadership and discipleship are very different things in a lot of ways. And discipleship is a little bit like followership, I guess. So I thought that first I'd start with the definition of a disciple. And, the caveat being that a lot of this word is used in a religious context, and that's not exactly what we're talking about here. So Merriam-Webster defines disciple as one who accepts and assists in spreading the doctrines of another, such as Christianity, which would be the religious context. But the other portion of that definition being a convinced adherent of a school or an individual. And definition, or the example given is, a discipline of Freud, the psychologist. And then if you take that a little bit of a step further, an adherent, which is, not to insult anybody's intelligence, but a believer or an advocate, especially of a particular idea, or a follower of a leader, party, or profession. So, again, they use the example of Freud's adherence or adherence of Christianity or adherence of socialism, whatnot. So I thought what was interesting about this conversation, or this topic is, we talked about this a little bit, I think, on our last podcast that you and I recorded together. But, can you have too many followers or followers that are too devoted, right? And when does that cause friction and issues in the organization? So, I think about a lot of popular leadership authors that we've talked about on this podcast that I read and enjoy. We talked about John Maxwell, Stephen Covey, Simon Sinek, these popular ones. Excuse me. But, when do you kind of cross that threshold almost dangerously into the terms of like, oh, I'm a disciple of Simon Sinek. I don't want anybody to think I'm a disciple of Simon Sinek. He could write a terrible book next and be like, that was awful. None of that makes any sense. People we follow are human and they can make mistakes. We know that because we make mistakes ourselves. So anyway, that's kind of where I wanted to kick this off. When is it wrong to be a disciple? When does having disciples cause friction or problems in your organization? Do you want disciples as a leader? Or do you want, skeptic followers perhaps, or something else? So I don't know. That's where I thought we could start.
That's a mouthful there.
Yeah. As I'm known for.
A lot of thought in there. And I know Brian and I had touched on this before about a different episode when we talked about kind of mentorship, and we were talking about how people can have an impact on you even if you don't know them. So like I know for me, like Jocko Willink, his books and his podcast had a big impact on me a few years ago. I don't consume as much of his content as I used to in the past. I just can't do a 4-hour podcast episode every week. Great content, but I just can't keep up. But just like you said, it's like once you go beyond that followership and you start hitting that disciple level, right? And just, like you said, make that caveat that we're not talking about religion here. It's are you following somebody blindly? I think from an organizational level, it's kind of better to have followers instead of disciples, right? Because I want people second guessing decisions that I'm making, right? It's good to have that outside view or the other view of like, hey, maybe what we're doing is wrong. Throw that idea out there, right? Challenge it. Because if we've all probably been in a situation where we're following some leader everybody knows that the direction that this project or whatever is going, it's going the wrong direction, but nobody wants to say anything because everybody's, on board, part of the team, doesn't want to, bring up anything or cause any friction or challenge any statements. And it's not that when we bring up people and we challenge ideas, we're not challenging them as individuals. And, there are ways to do it gracefully, right? And there's ways to do it not so gracefully. What are your thoughts on that, though?
Yeah, I think I would agree. I want folks that are going to, in the right ways, in the right context, challenge decisions that are being made or points of view that are being offered, especially in a collaborative type environment. I think, this disciple word, we really set ourselves up for a doozy here because it's not always in a negative context either. So it's, I don't want to frame it entirely. So I think what I was thinking about when you were talking just now is, are you the type of leader who's seeking disciples, or are you building leaders? And that to me could be the differentiation. Now that isn't to say that a quote unquote disciple, to use it in a more positive context, is somebody in my mind that maybe takes your ideas, takes what they've been taught at an organization or in a school or something like that, and then almost evangelizes that, to use another pseudo-religious term, but carries that on and maybe takes it further, right? So in that context, maybe building quote unquote disciples can be a good thing. But if you think you're the next greatest thing and everybody's going to listen to what I say, and I've unleashed and I've cracked the leadership code and I know exactly how everything should work, just follow me and listen and do what I say. If you're looking for those kind of disciples, folks that just follow you blindly, you're going to end up in a really bad spot because you're going to get to a point where you don't know what you're doing, and then you're just going to be faking it till you make it. I think an example of this that's relevant in the news right now is Elizabeth Holm from the Theranos company. It seems like, and I obviously never worked there, but it seems like from what I've read and seen, which is a great book, there was a great book written about her called Bad Blood, I believe. She was just seeking blind followers, discipler. I just made a word. Great. People who would just kind of blindly do what she says, believe that the technology worked without looking inside. And that's actually a great metaphor. This machine she built was basically this black box that you put a blood sample in and it's supposed to give you all these magical results, right? And really the technology didn't work. Are you the type of leader who wants people to look inside the black box, tinker with it, help you figure it out, make it better? Do you expect people to just trust me, it works, go do your job? I want to be the former, not the latter. And I think that's the most effective way to lead.
Yeah, I think that's a great example that you brought up, and one that's timely, right? That's going through the courts right now in the United States. For anyone who's not familiar with it, basically, they're looking at, they were scamming investors, right? That they had a product that didn't work, but that's probably, we could do a whole episode just on that in general. And some of the emails and communications that are coming out back and forth, that's a great thing with court cases, right? Discovery comes out and it gets made public, and you get to see instances of how people can be deceived, right? And how leadership can affect things negatively too. And that's probably, like you said, a great example of where leadership negatively impacts the organization, where everyone else, who's not at the very top, doesn't know what's going on, thinks everything's great, right? Here we are, we got lots of VC money. The media's talking about us. She was on Time magazine or something like that. She was on the cover of Forbes. So you're thinking as a follower in this organization, or if you're a disciple inside there, you're like, hey, this is great, right? We're on the path. We're on this rocket ship, and maybe we'll be the next Tesla or some huge tech firm that's going to be worth billions of dollars. And come to find out, one leak and a bunch of emails later, it's completely going the wrong direction. So I think it's always worth, like, you brought up a lot of stuff, and what I think of always too is being humble, right? And understanding that the people that you're following, are still human, right? We all make mistakes. We're nobody's perfect. I know I've done stuff in my career that that hasn't been great, and I'm sure you have too. We're human. We make mistakes, and I think being humble and realizing that can take it a long way to the point where you can look at stuff from a different lens.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. And, I wrote down kind of another question while you were talking there, which is, which seems to be kind of the road we're going down, or at least one possible path we can take, which is, on this show, we talk about leadership, how to lead all the time. But are you being a good follower? And are you making sure you're not just being a blind follower to the people above you in the organization, or, the folks that you feel might influence you, whether it's an author or a politician or a religious individual, whatever, whoever you seek guidance from in your life, could be family or a close friend. Are you just taking things at face value, or are you willing to dig a little bit and make sure, hey, what's really going on here? I think when you look at a lot of the scandals you see that make the news, Theranos, like we were just talking about, Bernie Madoff thing, Enron, all these major, scandals that we all know about. After the fact, you always hear people say, well, it never seemed quite right. I don't know, something was off, but I didn't really say anything, or I didn't want to get fired, or everybody else seemed to have confidence in it. So, I can't be the only smart one that figured it out. Right. So, learning to kind of build that inner skeptic, not the inner cynic, but the inner skeptic, be willing to ask the right questions, and to really understand something, before maybe going fully into it, which, again, using this word disciple, we're not talking about one's faith or anything like that. There's a whole leap of faith conversation that I'll leave to the religious scholars. But in a business context, are you really talking, or are you understanding what's being asked of you, and really looking at it is this the right kind of organization I want to be in? Is this the kind of leader that I want to follow? Or am I just being a quote unquote, blind disciple? Because that can get you into some trouble. And we've seen instances of that in military history. We talk about like the My Lai massacre or something like that. There's just example after example of how this stuff can go badly if you're not being just a little bit skeptical. And then, as a leader, are you making sure that you're empowering those people below you to be good followers? You can't just have blind disciples underneath you, but it in many ways requires a good leader to have good followers. So are you building an environment where that's possible? I know that was another mouthful, but just stream of consciousness here today.
So I was saying, that's the great thing about podcasting, right? We don't have to fill a thought in 90 seconds. And you see that with news too, right? In the media, is that they can cut, things to sound any way they want. But the great thing with podcasting is if you want to talk for 58 minutes about one thing, you can, right? Whether people want to listen or not, it's another story, but you get all that platform you want to express your thoughts and ideas.
Fucking people are probably just turning it off. Like, there goes that guy again, running his mouth. But that's it.
Yeah. So you brought a great thing up about questioning, right? About what's going on in My Lai, and the My Lai massacre. And for those who aren't familiar, that was it an army unit?
I believe so. Yeah.
Right?
I'm not an expert on the topic. It was just one that came to mind. But yeah, I believe it was an army unit.
Yeah. It was a United States Army unit in Vietnam who basically, murdered a village of people. And, the commander thought he was doing the right thing, and everyone was just misguided. But that's a great example, like you said right there, of following too much, right? Buying in too much and not questioning what you're doing and thinking, like, hey, is this the right thing to do? And I know even people get put in situations like that, maybe not as extreme, right? Where you might be asked to do something as a subordinate that might be questionable, right? And that's your chance to stop and think about what you're being asked to do and who you're following if that's what you should be doing. I know a lot of our listeners are in the technology space too, So being an IT administrator or something, you could have someone come to you and ask you to access people's email. You have keys to the kingdom, but that doesn't mean you should do that, right? When people ask for things, you should always stop for a minute and think about what you're being asked to do, especially if we're teeter-tottering on those gray areas where what you're doing could potentially be illegal. I'm going to say right now, if it's illegal, just don't do it, right? And I'm sure you would say that from your communications perspective, right? If anyone asks you to do anything illegal, do not do it. Doesn't matter about your job, right?
No, I agree. I think that something I always say to my team, if there is this kind of line between, there's a time and a place for challenging or having questions or follow-ups. And sometimes, if you're in a crisis comms situation, for instance, hey, we got to get a message out quickly to our customers or whomever it might be, or the general public. There's not always time to ask a million questions. Sometimes you need to trust that the people in your organization or above you in the organization or that are given direction are in those positions for a reason. They might have information that you don't have, and they need you to do a thing, whatever that is. And right now, we don't have time to explain it, or maybe not as in much detail as we'd like. So we just need you to do it. And what I tell my team is that, look, I love feedback. I love you to push back and ask questions and all that stuff. But sometimes there are going to be times where I'm going to have to say, I need you to do this thing. As long as it's not illegal, unethical, or immoral, which morality and ethics is a whole conversation, whether it's personally a problem for me or an organizational ethic, et cetera. But if it doesn't, if it's especially not illegal or unethical, I expect you to do it. And then we can talk about it later. I can explain the decision. Those situations are pretty rare. And I can maybe count on one hand the times in my life where as a leader, I've really had to sit the team down and say, I don't have time to explain. I need you to do this right now. Go. We'll talk about it later. And what's important about that is, one of the pillars I always talk about is, building trust. Have you built enough trust? Have you built enough leadership capital with your team so that, to bring it back to our initial topic, those times where you kind of need those blind disciples, have you built enough trust that they're going to do that for you when it's necessary? And I think part of that is after the situation like that has concluded, you kind of huddle back up, you do an after action. Here's what happened. Here's why I needed you all to act so quickly. There were probably better ways to do that had we, whatever that was, had we had time to pull the team and bring everybody together and ideate. Let's talk about what those might have been now so that if this ever happens again, we can just act on those things and build them into our SOPs. So a little bit off from where we started on that conversation there, I think, but there is a time where you need people to just follow. But it's incumbent on you as a leader to build the trust so that that'll happen when it needs to, and to not abuse that trust once you've built it.
I think trust is the key word there, right? You've got to build up that leadership capital over time to be able to ask for things like that, right? And when people get to know you and know your requests, they can kind of tell when something doesn't seem right, right? But like you said, it's like anything else. You've got a certain amount of leadership capital that you can burn, and if you're always burning it, it can leave you in a tight spot when you actually need something done for real. So I agree with everything you said right there.
More times than not, you want people following you because they want to, not because they have to. Another thing that I used to kind of say jokingly to some of my Marines back in the day is like, look, I believe it's a lot easier to ask somebody to do something than it is to tell them. Just understand that I reserve the right to tell you. This was always kind of the joke. And it rarely came to that. It was more kind of like a funny thing, I would say. But as a leader, sometimes you do need to remember, I do have positional authority here. And there are times where I need to exercise it. Again, you really want to work very hard to build the trust and relationships with folks and an environment overall that people are doing what you ask them to do. And they're asking the right questions. Well, hey, I don't understand why we would do this when we could do that. Or can you explain to me your thought process behind this? And A, if you can't explain it very well, then you probably haven't thought it through yourself. And B, if they're constantly questioning, in a challenging way, in a negative way, maybe you need to do some counseling with those employees and say, listen, there's a time and a place for that kind of challenging, and the staff meeting in front of 20 other people isn't it, but you're always welcome to come to me. So there's a lot of coaching moments, and it's not an easy thing, I guess is what I'm getting at, and why I'm rambling about it is that, there's this constant tension between, I want to be an inclusive leader that lets people give their ideas, and we actually have to get stuff done. And one of the big lessons I learned, I think I talked about this maybe on the very first time I was ever on the podcast, was you have to trust, or at least assume that other people in the organization know some things that you don't, especially if they're higher than you in the organization. So the example I think I gave, before was, you're a young Lance Corporal or private first class, whatever, and a sergeant or a lieutenant or a captain walks in and says, I need you to go do this. Yeah, we're all going to walk up, a platoon of Lance Corporals in the Marine Corps. One of the things we're best at in the world is complaining, right? So we're going to complain about the whole thing we're doing the whole time we're doing it. This is dumb. I would do it this way if I were the captain, if I were the CEO, blah, blah, blah. Because, we're all, of course, geniuses. But the idea being that once you pick up a little bit of rank, maybe you are that sergeant or you're that staff sergeant coming in and giving direction. It might be the exact same command or task that you used to complain about till you were blue in the face while you were asked to do it. And then, oh, now I'm a sergeant. Oh, I understand why we do it this way, because, there are 3 or 4 things between, flash and bang that need to happen that make this an important task, even if it's miserable or seems stupid to the person that's doing it. And I'll shut up in a second, but to bring that full circle, those are those types of activities where it's useful to say, in the example I'm giving, okay, Marines, I know you hated that thing I asked you to do yesterday. I know it seemed really stupid from your perspective. I didn't have time to explain it then. Thank you for doing it. Here's why that's important. Here are the steps that you should understand, or the parts of this process that you're not privy to on a day-to-day basis that make what you did important. So tying people back to the mission or the end task, even if you don't have time to do it up front. So again, as usual, that was a mouthful. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that tension. I think that's what I was really trying to get at.
Yeah, no, and I get what you're saying. And this reminds me, I think Simon Sinek says that, and I could be misremembering this, but I believe he said that the best books on leadership are always parenting books. And some of that's just because there's a dichotomy at play there when you're a parent, right? There's the things where you're asking your child to do something, but you're expecting them to do it, right? So there is that balance there. And I believe it was him. It could have been Stephen Covey or somebody, but I seem to remember it was Simon Sinek. And, as a parent myself, and I have a 6-year-old now, so I have one that's big enough to start questioning things that I'm asking him to do. I can totally believe that, right? That some of the things that I've learned in leadership, I've had to use just from a parenting perspective. And some things I've learned in parenting, I've used in a leadership perspective. So it's been a humbling experience, to say, for sure, and a learning experience, and one you'll get to, I'm sure, once your little one starts having some opinions and some ideas, and maybe you'll see that correlation too when that time comes.
Yeah, at 3 months she just discovered that she has feet, so we're not quite at the opinions, and but she's mesmerized by them, so it's a lot of fun. But no, that's a good point. I don't recall if it was Cynic or not who made that observation. I'm sure he wasn't the first or the last either. But I like to think of, parenting, or even just working with kids in general. Being good at one makes you better at the other. So being a good leader, I think, makes you a better parent. Being a good parent, or we all try to be good parents, but struggling through the challenge of parenthood probably makes you a little bit of a better leader as well. But you're right. You want people, again, just like your team, you want your kids to do things because they want to do them, because there's a challenge there. They're achieving something. Something my mom actually said, believe it or not, that speaking of parenting and good advice, good leadership, she views parenting as a constant letting go. And I was like, that's a really interesting observation, because we can fall into the trap as leaders or as parents of trying to micromanage every little thing, making sure our kid never gets hurt, or that they always have exactly what they need, or that they never cry, or they never fall down and hurt their knee or whatever. But if you're doing that, are they really growing? Are they really developing? So giving people kind of just that enough freedom to be a little bit dangerous, to maybe I'll give my kid enough freedom to fall down and skin her knee when she starts running around, but I'm not going to hand her the keys to the truck when she's 5 years old, right? So there's that, again, are we letting go just a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more as trust and confidence builds. I think that's a great comparison between parenting and leadership in general. I just hired a few new employees this year, and they're great. I hired them for their potential and for what they can do, and they're going to be an awesome fit for the organization. But they have a lot to learn. They haven't worked at this agency where I am for as long as the rest of the team, and not as long as I have, and that's okay, and I expect that. So right now I'm, kind of in some ways treating them like the toddler. I hate to use that analogy. I'm talking about grown adults. I don't baby talk anybody or
well, that's better than donkeys.
Right. Yeah. That's what we went with last time. Right.
Yeah.
We're going to need like an encyclopedia of what Jon really meant to say was, but as far as the correlation, right? The adult level, employee level toddler where, we're teaching you to tie your shoes right now. Okay. We're getting you out of those Velcro flip overs where, all right, now you know how to tie the shoes, and pretty soon we're going to let you run free. And, a year from now, I might hand you the keys to the truck, right? Maybe you'll be driving this whole program on your own, and that'd be great. But for now, you got to let them, what we say in the military is like crawl, walk, run, to keep with the child metaphor. Otherwise they could get themselves in trouble or get the organization in trouble. And that's not what you want. You don't want to damage somebody's, confidence. Hey, new employee, take on this huge thing, go ahead, and then watch them fail. But you might want to give them the opportunity to fail a little bit. There's some learning opportunities, and, to metaphorically fall down and skin their knee. You put a Band-Aid on it and keep going, right? It's a learning experience. So I don't put Band-Aids on any of my employees, but I think you get the metaphor.
Oh, one had some frozen Band-Aids or something. I always have those around in my house.
Nice.
Yeah, you'll hit that point, Jon, where you're going to watch a bunch of Disney movies.
Uh-huh. I'm already there. My wife
know
loves
the lines to them. Oh, okay. So you're just going to know them even more.
Indeed.
So, yeah, all great insights. Again, there's just a lot to unpack there. I feel like you brought up a good point too, and I know we're going to talk about talent in a later one. But it's about cultivating your employees, right? Letting them come from just being straight followers or, disciples, what we talked about, to letting them step up and take on responsibility to actually let them kind of replace you, right? If you're not training somebody to take over your job, I feel like you're kind of failing your organization as a leader, right? You should always kind of have a succession plan in place or some type of idea and start, growing people to be better than you are to take over for you. Just like somebody above you should probably be doing the same thing too. And I just literally just thinking about that when you were talking, I was like, that's right along the lines of what we have for another topic. But I think it's a great thing to bring up just even in this context that we're talking about. Sometimes you got to let your followers be the leaders on, not the whole thing, everything's going on, but maybe let them lead a project, right? And you sit back and let them make decisions. And like you said, let them let go, right? You got to let go at some point too, right? Let go and let them fail at certain things. If they might fail, you're not going to let them, burn, $2 million on a budget, but you might let them make a couple $1,000 mistake, so that they can learn it. Right. And just like, you and I do this thing, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and how often do you have to get submitted before you learn that you shouldn't put your arm here, you should put your leg there? For me, it's a bunch of times. It's like I've literally got to make the mistake a bunch of times, So it's all great stuff you brought up in your statements there.
I think anybody who's rolled jiu-jitsu with me has heard me say under my breath, "Well, that was dumb," about 3 seconds before I get tapped out or choked. So yeah, it's a common refrain for me. But you're right. It's those learning moments. And what's interesting about the jiu-jitsu metaphor is, once you learn a little bit, kind of be dangerous, you know what you're supposed to do, maybe, but you don't always do it, or you realize just a second too late, like I said, that was dumb. I know better than that. I didn't, right? So that's an I'm sure we can deep dive on the leadership jujitsu metaphor. But what I was thinking of while you were talking about, making sure you're building leaders below you or people that can take over for you is, on this topic of discipleship, are you being a good follower yourself? And these are all connected, right? If I'm not building a team below me that can take over some of these tasks and, that I can let go, I'm never going to have the freedom or the bandwidth to take on some stuff from my boss or from others in the organization, and ask for those opportunities, right? If I have an employee come to me that they're constantly tapped out, things are barely getting in by deadline. When they do, there's mistakes. They're overburdened. They're overburdened, and they shouldn't be. Based on the tasks and the requirements of the position, because they're not being proactive, they're not planning ahead, etc. I'm not going to give them more things. I'm not going to give them opportunities to lead and grow. Maybe as quickly as some others that their work's always in on time. They're asking for opportunities because, hey, I have extra time today. Work's of a high quality and quantity. All those things, those are signals to me that this person's ready to take on more responsibility. Now, again, as a leader, if you have that other person that's struggling, it's incumbent on you to do some root cause analysis. Is this person in the wrong position? Am I giving them too much work? Did I not train them appropriately? But once you've gone down all that checklist, maybe that person's just, falling victim to the Peter principle. We all rise to the level of our incompetence. And maybe you need to back them off or find a different fit for them or whatnot. But making sure that you as the leader then are building people that allow you to be that person in your boss's eyes that my work's getting in on time. It's always of a high quality. I'm asking for more opportunities. I have good ideas that contribute to the workforce, et cetera. Gives the idea to your boss or your supervisor that you're ready to take on more, and then they should be doing that themselves, and then they move up and you move up, right? So it's this continuous cycle that hopefully we can build as good leaders in an organization.
Exactly. And while you were talking, I was reminded, and I was thinking about the Lance Corporal thing you talked about too. The higher you go up in leadership positions, the less physical work you do, right? And you become more of a facilitator of work getting done. At least that's what it's been in my experience, right? The higher up you go, the more facilitating you're going to be doing, the more planning, and the less hands-on tactical work you do. And sometimes when you're dealing with followers, especially younger employees, right? The associate levels, the entry levels, your Lance Corporals, they haven't been in the corporate world or the working world long enough to realize that, hey, as a leader, sometimes, your job's to facilitate the work. That doesn't mean that you're not going to jump in, get your hands dirty when you need to, but, the leader's job is to facilitate work. And the higher up you go, kind of the less hands-on you do and the more facilitation you do. Has that been your experience as well, too, as you've gone on?
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with that statement. And it's a difficult transition for a lot of people to make, right? You almost feel guilty. It's like, oh, they're all out there, just to use a silly example. Everybody's out there shoveling snow, right? And I'm inside working on paperwork and, coordinating the next neighborhood we're going to go to shovel snow, whatever our next stops. And that they can feel guilty. I'm not out there breaking a sweat, but somebody has to do the job of that leader and make sure that the trains are running on time. And to be strategic, right? To make sure that we're planning ahead. We know, that, hey, I'm just going to keep using this snow shoveling analogy. I don't know where it came from, but right. Hey, we got a snow shoveling crew. And I know that, I got 40 team members out there shoveling in this blizzard, and, weather's saying there's another snowstorm coming in 3 days. We're going to be out here again. Okay, we're probably going to break, 4 shovels today. We're probably going to go through 140 pounds of salt. Our snow blowers are going to need oil changes. Getting ready to plan for all those things so that you're ready for the next storm, right? Again, that's not quote unquote hard work in the sense that you're out there busting a sweat and breaking your back with the team, but it's necessary work and it's important work, and it's why leaders in organizations tend to make a little bit more money, right? So, the analogy being, when I worked in, an industrial setting, if you have a high level manager that's in your plant or, maybe on your snow shoveling team, right? you're not paying them to get out there and move the snow. You're paying them to get out there and make sure the snow gets moved. So if I'm looking on my cameras in my production plant and I see somebody that I'm paying $75,000 a year to manage this big business, pushing a pallet jack around, it's like, okay, I have people that I pay $15 an hour to do that. You're actually wasting money because you're paid your salary to make sure that those boxes get to where they need to be on the right time, and that you don't have to be out there doing those things. And that's a really difficult concept for a lot of people to grasp. And it's a fine line with servant leadership, right? There is a time where you need to roll up your sleeves and get out there and get dirty and, grab the shovel or move the boxes. Sometimes to make a point, to show folks how it's done, or to show folks that you're out there with them. But if you're doing it every day, you're probably neglecting some other responsibility that you've been hired and that you're getting paid to do. So, it's a difficult thing. It's a fine line, as I said. But that's a skill you can develop and grow, is knowing when to get your hands dirty and when to just say, yep, I know half the team out there thinks I'm in here lazy, drinking coffee, doing nothing. But you know what? People with that kind of mentality are never going to be sitting in this seat, at least not if they don't change the way they think. So you're in leadership position for a reason. Take that and take those responsibilities seriously, and make sure your team has what they need to be successful moving forward. Otherwise, you're not doing your job. You can break a sweat all you want, but that's not going to get the job done. It's not why you're there.
I like that. Break all the sweat you want. And it's, like you said, it's a tough transition, right? Especially if you were very task driven before and you got promoted because you're a good tactician. It's difficult to let go of that and realize that your job now is to facilitate the work happening. And, it's a tough transition for everybody, I'd say. I think with that, that's probably a good spot to wrap. But we're going to start this new segment right now, and I just sprung this on you. Give me your leadership hack here. Hold on, I'm going to get a timer going here. We need a timer. I'm going to let's use my phone here. Mm-hmm. 1 second. I need your 60-second leadership hack here. I'm going to get a clock going here. You're on the clock. I'll tell you when.
Hack on any topic.
Do you want to see the clock?
Any leadership.
You want to see the
nugget?
Any leadership topic.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Your 60-second leadership hack. Starting now.
Okay. Well, the thing that comes to mind since I'm on the clock is managing your time, right? So there's that old saying, we can't manage time. We can only manage ourselves within the time that we have. So something I do that my staff is aware of, my boss is aware of, is I gobble up those white spots on my calendar like a hungry hippo. So if there's a blank spot on my calendar, I schedule deep work time in there. Not 100% of it, but at least 2 blocks, 2 hours of deep work time, non-negotiable every single day. And that way it's on there and I have that time, especially in this virtual world. We find ourselves in meeting after meeting after meeting, and we don't actually get any of the work done. So I proactively make sure I schedule in that time to get work done for me. The only people that are allowed to invade that time are me, because I decided it, or somebody above me in the organization. And that's my 60-second leadership hack. And I did it in 53. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
You got time for a commercial break in there. No.
Yeah. We need like Brian to make like a, what do they call it? They call it a break, but there's an audio sound. I can't remember. It has a specific name to it, to cue that you're going to a segment or
nice, yeah.
Switching stuff. But hey, I sprung it on you, and that is your idea.
Okay. Do I need to put 60 seconds on the clock for you now?
Hey, sure. Why not?
All right, let's see how you do at your own game. I'm going to count you down, make it a little bit more pressure inducing. 1 second. All right, you ready? Can you see the clock?
Yep.
Go.
So here is my leadership hack, right? And I learned this from one of our previous guests, Peter Margaritas. And it's this idea of when somebody's talking, it's listening to understand what's being said to you, right? A lot of times when we're listening to people and we're communicating with them, we're not really communicating with them. What we're doing is we're just waiting for them to stop speaking so that we can say what we were thinking, right? It's taking this idea of waiting, listening to somebody as they speak, and trying to understand them, giving them the opportunity to speak and being understood instead of just trying to respond. And it's just like we said, right? And I brought it up on a different episode is, are you going to ask a question or are you going to make a statement, right? So that is my leadership hack is when you're listening to somebody, listen to understand them and not listen to respond. 5 seconds left.
And there goes the alarm.
So what do you think? Is that a winner segment?
I think that's pretty good. I like it. I think we should work on a little higher tech way than shoving our cameras in the computer. But
I literally just thought about it now, but on future episodes, we will have we'll have a timer. I'll have an audio sound or something that I can play. I just got to find one that's exactly a minute.
Right. No, it was good.
Yeah,
I like
so
it.
that's your idea. So everyone be on the lookout for the leadership hack, the 60-second leadership hack. And I think what we'll do is when we have a guest, that'll be one of the things we'll do with them, as well as the book. But so be on the lookout, right? Do you have any books that come to mind?
Oh, there's always
for this topic.
There's always
you don't have to have one.
I just we
normally bring up books, but
yeah, I think that the one we talked about last time, that Good Strategy, Bad Strategy book, I don't, just it's still fresh in my mind, but that idea of thinking about how you think. So that book is almost entirely about that in hindsight. So, and that's really the most important thing, if making sure you're not being a blind follower or just a blind disciple, thinking about how you think. So I think there are a number of books out there that have various levels of crowd approval, I guess, for lack of a better term, but there's like Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. There is Freakonomics, which again is kind of an oldie but a goodie. What was the other one? Malcolm Gladwell just wrote Talking to Strangers, I think. So any of these books
that's a good book.
Yeah. Any of these books that they might not be specifically about leadership, but if they're going to challenge the way you think about the world, maybe a particularly ideology or thought process that you've been using that might only be true in your own mind, or only true at least from your own perspective, any kind of book or movie or documentary or anything like that expands the way you see the world, and helps you think about your own thoughts, I think is a worthwhile endeavor. So don't be a blind disciple. Discipleship isn't always bad if you have good leaders, but make sure you're thinking through why it is that you're following, who or what it is that you're following.
Great ones. I would recommend all the same ones that you did. And there was a book, I started reading it, I didn't finish it, but it's called The Way of the Shepherd. And it just talks to you about, basically this reporter goes around, talks to different CEOs about the things that, where am I? I'm lost here, man. But about different CEOs and their ways of kind of being, different servant leaders. So I started reading it. I didn't finish the whole book, but I think it's a good one that has great ideas about the topic we discussed today.
Great.
Yeah. With that, I guess we'll just wrap it out. If you're listening to this on iTunes, podcasts, Spotify, whatever, if you could just rate us, give us a review, let us know how we're doing. Good or bad review. I'll take either one of them. Just go ahead and rate us. If you're watching on YouTube, if you could hit the like button and subscribe. You can hit the bell if you want to know when we release an episode. We're on season 3 right now. We're getting ready to work on season 4 here soon. Got some great guests lined up. And anything else to add in closing out, John?
Yeah, I would just add to our listeners, if you have a topic or anything you want us to cover, throw it in the comments anywhere that Nick just mentioned. We're always looking for good topics, good books, any recommendations, or just your thoughts on what we've said. Again, so it doesn't just have to be a thumbs up or a thumbs down. We'd love for people to start engaging with us and really making yourselves part of the conversation.
Yeah, and with that, thanks everyone for listening.